Hello, everyone. Sorry, I think you were watching my technical difficulties there for a second. My name is Sarah. Welcome to How to Calculate Profit Margin for Your Janitorial Services webinar. We're glad you're here. As we just wait for a few more people to join, if you want to post in the chat box, just say hello and where you're from. We love hearing where everyone is tuning in from. Again, my name's Sarah. I'm with Team Swept. I'm going to be your host today, but we have two lovely presenters with us as well. Gary Clipperton of National Pro Clean. Gary has been on many webinars with us at this point, and we love having him because he is so knowledgeable. He has over 40 years of experience in the janitorial industry, especially when it comes to bidding and selling. He is an expert, and he has written many different educational pieces, books. He's got tons of training material on his website. He's got a bidding program that you can use to help you when you are quoting contracts. You can find it all at nationalproclean.com, I believe. If you Google it, it will come up. We also have my colleague Tristan from Swept here, and he's going to hang out during Gary's presentation and be here at the end to answer any questions you have about Swept, because what tends to happen is that because Swept can also help you cut down on your expenses, increase your profit margin, because it's linked to so many different operational points in your business. There's often questions about Swept that come up. So Tristan will be able to answer those at the end. So I'm just going to give people a few more seconds to come through. Again, that's the three of us. I'm behind on my slides. And oh yes, housekeeping. So the webinar is being recorded. You will get a copy, not just you can, but you will get a copy after the fact. When we're done, we'll send it out. Again, ask your questions in the chat box, and we will answer all questions at the end of Gary's presentation. And then if you have questions about Swept specifically, Tristan can answer those after we're done a round of Q&A with Tristan, or with Gary, sorry. So I think that's all I have. I'm going to hand things over to Gary, and he's going to share his screen.
Okay, let's see.
Hit stop. There we go.
And okay, did I do it right?
We're not seeing your screen yet. There it is.
Okay. So thank you, Sarah, and thank you everyone for joining us today. The session will be how to calculate the profit margin for each bid. And Sarah has some questions to ask, and I'll try my best to answer those. Okay, so back to you.
Sorry, Gary, I think I was on mute there for a second. So our first question, I'm just wondering if you can just give us some general best practices or guidelines for calculating your profit margin.
I'd like to suggest that contractor pricing should always be win-win. So for the customer, that means that the price, of course, is fair, affordable, and competitive. But for you, the price must earn the required net profit to pay your bills and earn a decent living and help build a nice future. But unfortunately, some folks are satisfied with just getting by. So often the startup companies, they'll discount the price to land their first round of customers. However, to repeat this discount policy, it can make it difficult to raise your prices when that becomes necessary. So if you price your proposal too low, you'll churn dollars without really keeping any. And that happens when you leave too much money on the table. Conversely, if you overinflate your price, you might disqualify yourself. I helped set up a man years ago in the business, wrote my first book back then, and he was over in Dallas, and he was very excited about our contractor training program. He started looking at the prices that we had suggested, and he thought, you know what, I bet I can get a lot more money out of those accounts. So he took our suggested pricing and almost doubled it. And I talked to him one day. He said, man, things are really going good, really doing well. About a year later, for some reason, I don't recall, I called him and I said, how are things going? And he says, not very well, Gary. He said, we lost all of our accounts. I said, you lost all of your accounts? He said, yes, one annual time to renew the contract and they took some other proposals, all the other proposals were much lower than ours, so they went with the lower price. So it has to be like sustainable and competitive on your pricing. So what we call it is fair market value, and it is a win-win relationship. But when we undercut prices too much, then it kind of makes our profession a common type of commodity, you might say. So what we have to do, we have to really focus on selling quality and value added. That's what's going to be required to overcome this lowball bid and cheap marketing concepts. So remember this. We're providing a service that protects the customer's assets. It ensures the safety for everyone, protects their indoor air quality, enhances the employees' sense of well-being with a sanitary environment, and it protects the health of everyone in the building by removing unsanitary conditions. So that's what we offer.
Awesome. Thank you. So, do you have any tips on figuring out what your costs are?
Yes. As we mentioned in a previous webinar, you can counter the low pricing by offering a partial clean on certain nights to bring your prices down when you need to. This only works in certain situations, but our JanBid program allows you to enter a partial clean on any given night or even 4 nights a week, where you virtually skip the dusting and the detail work. You only vacuum the traffic lanes, but you do present a clean building, but without spending as much time. So your competitors may already be doing this. They're just not telling the customer. But at least you're being transparent. Again, you have to discuss this with your prospect in advance to see if this would work for them, and that's what they're looking for. Another item to review is making sure that your labor rates are suitable for your workers, but at the same time staying competitive. And our cleaning manager's dashboard, you can review and analyze all of your expenses to see if any areas seem excessive. You can even compare them to national averages. But remember this, mean and lean is always good, and so is avoiding debt. Our JanBid program then crunches all the numbers, including labor, payroll expenses, your chemical equipment, and especially all of your overhead. So when you use a system that calculates all of your expenses, you arrive at an hourly break-even point, very critical. Now, that break-even point we're showing here, that might be, say, $14 an hour in Toledo, Ohio, or maybe $20 an hour in Seattle. But it depends upon your city. So once you have the break-even, then you're ready to start adding your profit. And you should project and allow allowances for pay increases during the term of the contract. So we have a spreadsheet to do that, where you can plug in proposed or even promised pay raises for your crews. And don't forget, if you need a working supervisor, every minute that's spent supervising must be added back to the nightly, and we have a formula for that. So if you have overtime or maybe a 7-day-a-week account and you have to pay for holiday pay, then you want to factor that into your expenses, plus any travel time whenever that might be justified.
Great. So, how do you determine the right amount of markup or profit on an account?
Sure. We believe the best approach in selecting your profit margin is to use a sliding scale. We have one shown here on the screen. So what it means is that on small buildings, you normally can add a higher margin, maybe even 70% on a 2,000 square foot building that's only cleaned once a week. But on a medium building, you might be down to around 35%. And on very large buildings, you'll need a narrow margin to stay competitive, maybe even down to around 18%. So JanBid shows you how to pinpoint the correct amount of profit. So it's great to use a program where you can run an unlimited number of scenarios to view the full range and all the options on how much you can earn and should earn. And often your bonus, your extra income comes from project work and carpet care, which is usually billed out at a higher rate, sometimes double or triple of the janitorial rate. So here's some insight into calculating your margins. Many formulas calculate the margins by using the break-even point, that'd be the total of all of your expenses, as the basis, as a starting point. If your desired profit, say in this example, was a 35% margin, then you'd add that to if your expenses were say $1,000 a month, you'd add the 35%, and you'd have 1,350. Another example would be if you have a larger building, and maybe it's $3,000 a month for all of your expenses, then if you add a 35% margin, then on that building you'd be at $4,050. Okay. Now, so far, what you've done is you've added the profit to your expenses. However, to base your margin on the amount of your total billing, and you wanted a 35% margin of your unknown billing rate, then what you would do is you would take and subtract 35% from 100%, and your answer, of course, is 65. Then you take your $3,000 in expenses, $3,000 a month in projected expenses, and you divide that by 65%, and now you arrive at 4615. So now you're showing $565 a month more than just adding the 35%. So this is a 35% margin of your billing price, not 35% of your expenses. And really, when you think about it, the extra $565 a month on this one account is just enough to purchase new equipment or a new vehicle or put some extra money into your retirement account. So here's a couple other considerations in, you might say, tweaking your final price. First, determine how much it would cost the building owner or the manager to hire his own crew and recruit and pay a cleaning manager to run the crew every night. Now, if your proposal, if your quote is like double of that amount, you probably won't be very competitive. Another thing to take into consideration or approach to monitor is how much an hour you must earn while running your crews in order to meet your personal monthly budget or the goals that you set. So in the janitorial business, your hourly billing rate is what provides your income. And you can only calculate your price on the hours that you will be billing while your crews are up and going and running that night. So if your goal, say for example, at the end of the first year is to earn $6,000 a month net with helpers doing all the work, in other words, you're paying a crew to run the building for you, you'll probably need to bill out, say, around $14,000 a month. And so we have spreadsheets that show you how to project your future income, and it's kind of nice to play with the different scenarios and see what the results would come up with. Another thing, as you grow and you want to tackle some of the very large prospects in your trade area, you can learn what the going rate is by purchasing the BOMA Experience Exchange Report for your city. So that's kind of a basic summary of your pricing. And we have products that help you do this, have an entire lineup of training programs, and they cover pretty much every detail of the business: carpet care, floor care, managing your accounts. And you can check them out. We have a lot of free tips, and you're welcome to look at that. And our website, nationalproclaim.com, there's my email. And we'll be doing, I believe, one other webinar on wrapping up this series. There's been 4 of them now up till this point. And you'll want to check those out if you missed any. And SWEP will be showing their program and how it helps you close more contracts. So that's kind of what we had on our agenda today, and be glad to answer any questions, and turn it back to you, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Gary. We do have some questions coming in. The first one was from Peter. Do you have a good rule of thumb for direct labor costs, payroll, overtime, taxes, etc.?
Well, payroll and payroll taxes, you normally try not to 65% of your total costs, if at all possible. And there are some accounts where you may have a crew running it all for you. In other words, you have some really great people, especially in smaller accounts. And at that point, you might be real lean and be down to, say, 50% for labor and payroll taxes. When you go below that, then usually it indicates that the people aren't earning enough and you'll have a high turnover. So it's kind of a combination of treating your people real well, showing them that they're appreciated, being invested in what they're doing, giving them all the right tools, chemical equipment, helping them with perhaps the program you're going to show as far as keeping good communications going. And so all this goes into the mix of keeping people happy, because happy workers tend to do a better job. They'll stay with you longer, but at the same time, they can't be earning peanuts and expect them to show up every night. So it's got to be win-win with your employees as well, and use those guidelines, maybe 50 to 65%. All righty.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so another question. How many packages should we propose, from Fabio?
Well, um, it all depends on how you're sizing up the customer. And one little background noise there. One of the questions we like to ask during the building survey, and I believe we covered this on a previous seminar, is Mr. Prospect, do you have a budget number in mind with your that you'd like to keep within, maybe a minimum or a maximum on your monthly cleaning costs? A lot of people won't answer that, and that's okay. At least you asked. Then you don't know when they give you a number if it's really the actual number or a number they hope you'll fall for and come in and make a proposal that low. But if you're discussing numbers and you pick up on the fact during your survey that they want is a cheap price, they're not really concerned. The number one priority is not quality, in other words. And sometimes you really can't help a prospect like that because you want to be able to sign your name, you might say, to the quality of the building and the appearance of it. You hope to use it as a reference, and get it as get referrals from that company. So you need a customer that also appreciates quality. And so if you discuss with them the price issue and you feel that's driving their decision, then you could offer to do a partial clean, even 4 nights a week. And with JanBid, it'll print out 2 proposals, one for a complete clean, one for a partial, and it spells out what the difference would be. And of course, as we mentioned, it would be emptying the trash and cleaning the restrooms, thoroughly, but the dusting, detail work, and vacuum would be cut way back, and JanBid would reduce that by 25%. And so at least you're presenting a partial proposal and you're being transparent. You're showing them exactly what they'll get for their money, and then it kind of puts the decision into their hands. But it depends on every situation. You have to kind of size it up and use some of your own wisdom and judgment on what the customer is really looking for.
Right. So it sounds like it's sort of case by case in a lot of senses, and you need the right tools as well. I see that there's a couple questions here that are quite broad, and I think you've sort of already answered them. If there's any more specific questions, there's here one from Aaron just came in. Suggestions for residential margins. I'm not sure if you want to get into that, Gary, but if you'd like to, go ahead.
I mainly I do have a bidding program called Made for You, and that comes free with JanBid. I don't recall the margins. I'm thinking that they're right in the ballpark of commercial. To tell you the truth, I'd have to look at my program and see what it's pulling up, because I don't work with residential on a daily basis like I do the commercial.
Right. That's fair. So Aaron, you can follow up with Gary and learn more about whether or not JanBid and the Made for You portion of it can help Another question here, Connor's wondering, what do you think about showing a customer the full price breakdown with all percentages versus bidding with just one flat price?
Well, I prefer initially not to share any of my confidential information. I think you have a little bit of you have a slight edge when you don't have to reveal everything, because now you've given the prospect a chart which they can use now to pick apart. Yeah, that rhymes, doesn't it? A chart to pick apart. But what I mean is they'll look at your different expense levels and they'll say, oh, you don't have to be that high. Can't you reduce that? So it'll to have too much information about your operations. Besides that, what if they really did that in order to share it with their best friend who was turning in a bid the same day? You see, or their brother-in-law who's bidding on the building, and all they wanted was a couple more bids just to justify the brother-in-law's price or to help the brother-in-law tweak it. And I'm using this just as an example, of course, but too much information can be too much information, and then your negotiations tend to go south to some degree. Now, in some cases, though, as a last resort, I would recommend, or I wouldn't say I'll recommend, but I'm okay with sharing what your labor hours would be. I don't like to do that up front if I don't have to. But some prospects and even a lot of government facilities, you're actually bidding and showing what your labor hours are to even do vacuuming or restroom cleaning or trash removal. They want a full breakdown. And if you want to play the game with them, then you have to show them what all of your expenses are in that case. And hopefully they keep that confidential. Government agencies should. But like I say, as a last resort, you might roll out some numbers on how much labor you're going to put into the building and suggest to the prospect that if they're thinking of a lowball bid that doesn't allow the labor to be covered, they're going to get a very low quality in their cleaning program. It takes so many hours to do this work. And for someone to short it, they either don't know what they're doing or they have undocumented workers, or maybe they're just selling off the contract to someone and it doesn't really matter to them how much profit is in it because they're making their money up front on selling the account. So again, there's no hard and fast rules. There's just navigating with that prospect, what you think they're looking for, being honest with them, trying to share what's necessary without exposing your entire hand of what you're dealing with.
Thanks, Gary. So there are some questions about JanBid, and there's some specific questions coming in around like, how could I quote this type of building this many days a week? I think those are better suited for offline or checking out your product and actually trying it out rather than us answering them on air. So unless we have any others, they're coming in so fast now, I can't keep up. Let's try this one from Ron. Can you tell us about overhead and how to calculate what percentage of that should be included in the bid?
Well, basically, if you have a program like our JanBid, then it uses a national average for overhead. And I think it's somewhere we're projecting around 11%. But when you add an office, you're going to be up in the 20% range. And if you have a secretary and an office crew, you might be up to 25%. The important thing is to really monitor it each month to see if something is getting out of hand. But basically, it's just taking all of the expenses that aren't payroll, labor, or chemical. Normally that falls into your overhead, which might be your advertising or your cost of your phone bills and, everything, insurance, everything that comes in that. I think we have like 17 categories in our spreadsheet that we use. And so you would take your checkbook or ledger or your income expense statement, and you could plug those numbers into our calculator, and it'll show you what percent your overheads run in your payroll costs, your chemical, your equipment. And then you could do that each month, and then you would have an up-to-date number of what your overhead is running. But if it jumps up, too high some month. Maybe you buy 5 automatic floor scrubbers at $7,000 a piece, then that's going to show a high expenditure on your equipment, and you'd want to average that out. I think most accountants, and I'm certainly not one, would say you'd average that out over like a 3-year period for your tax write-off. So anyway, that probably sums it up. Is your overhead is what it takes to stay in business, and you've got to cover it. You shouldn't be, you have to include that in your expenses. Bottom line.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'm gonna just do one more question live, and then as Irene posted in the chat, we can always follow up afterwards. We'll forward your questions to Gary if more come in. But I think this last one is a good segue into Tristan's portion of the presentation. Question was from Dominic. It's, what are some examples of a value add in a competitive market? So I'll let Gary answer first, and then maybe we'll hand things over to Tristan.
Okay. Actually, we're going to cover that in detail in our next seminar. What is it called? A killer proposal. So I like to use a lot of before and after photos. So I go into a building and clean it up, take photos of everything before and then after, and show the prospect the type of turnaround that you offer. You see, it's kind of hard to just tell the prospect, oh, we're going to turn everything around. It's going to look really nice and bright and shiny. But people are sometimes curious when you open up a presentation book and here's a whole bunch of photos showing before and after. And that's part of value add. As your quality control inspection program, so would be your operations manual. And this is what we have in our program, is an operations manual that has a procedure for everything. So if they ask you, how do you handle action? And the wrong answer is to say, the wrong answer, but it's not the best answer. The best answer would be to go to our operations manual, and you have like 20 pages of how to eliminate cross-contamination. And you say, our people are trained on how to handle all the cleaning of the high touch points. We make sure that those are disinfected each night, the door handles and so forth. So you get into some of the nuts and bolts, maybe building safety, building security checks. But especially at this point, you'd want to dive into the SWEP program that you would have on your smartphone, where you're able to show your prospects, show your employees what all you do on a nightly basis, how to tweak their operations, how to communicate back and forth. And then you're showing this to your prospect. So we'll cover in detail more of that next time, but those are just a few key points that you have to prove your cleaning system, your service is superior to what other companies are going to be. All we'll provide some more tools for you, but it's something you should always be thinking about, because it's slightly higher, justify it, and you just value added, prove quality, hassle-free service, and things like that.
Right, and I have to say I agree with Gary. I think he hit the nail on the head. He's talking about really being able to prove that you're different from the competitors, not just saying, oh, my staff are the best trained, or we're the most reliable, but actually show them with proof, with photos, or with your inspection reports, or with a tool like SWEP, that you actually are different and that you have systems in place, your handbook maybe, as Gary gave the example of, but be able to show them in person or through photos that you have things in place that set you apart from the competition. So that's exactly what I was hoping. This is a great segue into Tristan's presentation. We often get questions about, well, where does SWEP come into this whole process when it comes to bidding and selling? He's going to do a quick overview, and then if there's specific questions about our platform, you can ask those in the chat as well. But Tristan, if you are good, Thanks, Gary. We'll chat with you again in a moment. I'll hand things over to Tristan.
Perfect. So just to make sure my screen is being shared now, Sarah, are you seeing the SWEPT application?
That's what I'm seeing. If anyone else is having trouble, just post in the chat and we'll fix it up.
Perfect. I'm also happy to answer any questions on SWEPT. At the end of here, we'll only take 5 or 6 minutes just to show you a couple points to tie in with today's presentation. So what you're looking at on my screen, on your screen now, is the SWEPT mobile app. And SWEPT is a tool to help you improve support and communication across your team, from your management and supervisors right down to your cleaners. And the tool really is a tool that's built for the cleaners' benefit, that they can then pass on to your clients with improved service and improved communication. So today's topic was profit margin, and how can SWEPT help you improve those profit margins? One of the things that SWEPT is a timekeeping solution. So when an employee arrives at a location, they need to clock into their shift by signing in the mobile app. We also have an IVR clock-in system. If somebody doesn't have a smartphone, they can clock in through a 1-800 number with a PIN code. And when I sign into a shift, it will welcome me to my shift and start collecting my hours, but it will also take a GPS fix of my location. So my manager can see if I'm signing into a location that I'm not physically at. And I'll circle back to this in a couple moments here to show you some more details on that. We also capture cleaning instructions for you. So if I click on instructions, I have a step-by-step walkthrough of everything that needs to be completed on my job site. So this is where you can include special requests from the client, what products to be using, and really just a detailed step-by-step process of what needs to be done at the job site. When we were a cleaning company, we used this to help win new contracts. And we would show up and do our walkthrough, and we would ask the prospective client to take us to the problem areas of the building. What are their biggest challenges and biggest pain points with their existing cleaning company? And we take a snapshot of that area and we doctor it up using a program called Sketch, where you can add arrows and notes to the picture. And we would demonstrate to them exactly what our staff has when they show up to do their job. It was an excellent way to build trust and compete in bids without just dropping our prices as low as we could go to win the contract. In fact, we have a lot of customers that pass on the $5 or $7 per location fee for SWEPT to their customers by including it as a technology fee or bundling it in to their bid price. And if you're offering regularly scheduled janitorial services, it's something that's very easy to incorporate into those large bids, so you don't have to absorb that cost. Another option is our messaging system. So when you're assigned to a location as a cleaner or a manager, you have the ability to send messages back and forth across your team. And the messaging board, as well as the cleaning instructions, all can feature enhanced translation. So if they're posted in English, I can consume that information as a cleaner or a manager in my language preference. I have mine set to be Spanish right now. So we have cleaners and companies that use this to incentivize their staff to explore potential upsell and cross-sell opportunities. So the example I always use is if you don't do pressure washing in the building outside. A cleaner can take a snapshot of the building, send the message to their manager, and then the manager or the sales team or the owner can reach out to that client and explore potential upsell or cross-sell opportunities. It's also a great way for cleaners to report problems and issues and really keep in touch with their team to make sure that they have the resources they need to do the job, and also for the managers to hold their team accountable and make sure they're aware of issues that may occur or special requests from the client. I'm going to sign out here as a cleaner, and I'm actually going to sign in as a manager here. So just bear with me one moment. So when a cleaner clocks in and out of a shift, and they're not physically on site, you can have the software set up that a manager would receive a notification. So I have at the top of my screen an off-site sign-in by John Smith from today. If I click on that, it will give me a snapshot of where the cleaner was, and that's my actual location, and where the cleaning site was, which is the red bounding box, which is a mall in our area. It's about a quarter mile up the road. but I can see here that my employee is signed into a shift that they were not physically at. We do not pay them for travel time. So now we can speak to the cleaner and make sure they realize they should be signing in to their shifts when they're physically on site. Or we can enable mandatory geofences in SWEPT, where an employee is unable to clock in or out unless their phone's GPS is located in that bounding box. And it's a great way to get control of your payroll and further drive your profit margins. In addition to offsite sign-ins, we do capture no-shows or people that are late for their shift. So I have my app set up that if a cleaner doesn't show up to their shift on time, after 10 minutes, I, as the manager, will receive a notification. So I know that the cleaner's not on site, or at the very least not signed into their shift. So I can reach out to them and find out if they're late or sick, or if they're on site cleaning and they just have forgotten to sign in. So it's a great way to, again, to demonstrate how your company is different, how you're going to respond to absenteeism, and build further trust so you don't have to drop to that lowest cost. Another hidden expense is employee turnover. And one of the things SWEPT captures once a week for every cleaner at the end of their shift, we'll ask the employee how they feel about their cleaning week. And that's captured under the mood history report. And what this will show is either a sad face, a kind of indifferent face, or a happy face. And you want to see a bunch of happy employees regularly. If they are happy, you're much more less likely to experience turnover and endure the painful costs of bringing on new employees, allocating your time and resources to training them, which can be a massive expense. If they're unhappy, that's a reason to reach out to them and provide them with additional training, or work with them on their hours, or whatever is driving that unhappiness, trying to rectify it before you're making job postings and consuming more of your time. The last report I want to jump into here is in our desktop application. And we also have something called a schedule variance report. And what this will do is, again, a way to get control of your hours and making sure that your staff is both on site for the appropriate amount of time and not staying longer than they should be for their shifts. So the schedule variance will capture any time an employee leaves their shift early or stays late. So if you have an employee that's showing up for only 20 minutes of a 4-hour shift, chances are they're not doing an exceptional job. They're cutting corners, they're not doing any work. It could be for a number of reasons. But if you have employees that are staying later than they should, maybe an employee is late for every shift they work. Maybe they need more training. Maybe they need more assistance. Maybe they're not a great cleaner, and maybe they shouldn't be on the high profile, high profitable accounts that you service. Or maybe it doesn't matter who's working at that location. They're always 1 or 2 hours later at that location. The job is probably too big and you're not scheduling enough employees or enough hours, and that's going to drastically eat into your profit margins. So it's a great way to help you capture and get control of hours worked versus hours billed. So those are just a few pieces of SWEPT that I wanted to show today. I'm absolutely happy to extend the offer for anybody that would like to book some more time one-on-one. There's a bunch of pieces of the software that we haven't touched on: inspections, supply ordering, various other points that we can spend more time on. And I encourage anybody that's interested in learning more or getting some training on the free account that they may already have with SWEPT to reach out to us in the follow-up email that's going to be coming out here in the next hour or so with your replay of the webinar, and booking me or one of my counterparts here to learn more or ask further questions. And Sarah, if any questions came in during my piece here, I'd be happy to answer them.
Yeah, so we did have a couple. Some of them are from SWEPT customers. So we will have either your customer success manager follow up, or someone from our support team if it's like a specific "how do I do this in SWEPT" question. One of them from someone who's not yet, doesn't sound like they're using SWEPT yet, is Robert. It's kind of a 3-part question, so I'll try and say it slowly. So how does it compare to MITC software? Is it cloud-based? And are there varying versions of SWEPT?
So I am not familiar with MITC. Do you have any familiarity with that, Sarah?
Well, it's not one we hear a whole lot. We definitely hear of our users coming from other management software platforms. That's not one of the most common. I'd be happy to, one of us can follow up with you specifically on that, Robert, after the fact. We can do some digging and some comparison and find out how, if that's what you're using now, what it's doing for you and what you're happy with and what you're not happy with. But maybe Tristan, I could answer this, but since I don't want to steal your thunder, is it cloud-based and are there varying versions?
So first, there are varying versions of the application. We have both the Start plan and the Grow plan for Swept, and both the pricing models are available on our website. Some of the features are only available in the Grow plan, and the Grow plan is $7 per location versus the $5 per location for the Start plan. And the main features that you're going to be seeing there in the more expensive plan are the enhanced translation features, the IVR clock-in support. Those are all considered kind of add-ons or additional pieces. Any costs associated with the IVR and phone numbers or text messaging alerts or things of that nature, we take on that piece. We don't pass on those costs to you. The other most popular piece of the more expensive plan, the Grow plan, is quality inspections. So when you conduct a quality walkthrough or a quality audit, in the Grow plan, which is our more popular plan, you can have unlimited inspectors versus the Start plan, where you're only able to have one inspector. We also do have the free plan. It allows you to create up to 3 locations and play around with Swept on your own time. There's no time constraints. There's only the constraint of you can create 3 locations and 10 cleaners. You aren't able to leverage some of the advanced features that are crossed out below, and we don't have any sort of text messaging or SMS notifications. Everything's cloud-based for storage of data, so it's not going to consume ample amounts of data on your employee's phone. It's all accessible through the web application and the smartphone app. Data usage isn't a massive amount for your employee's phone. I think the app only takes up about 20 megs of data, and we host everything on Amazon services, so it is very reliable and cloud-based there for you.
Awesome. So I don't think I see any more that are specific to, someone who hasn't used the product before. So like I said, if you're a customer, we will definitely follow up. We'll make sure that your assigned representative gets in touch with you and helps you out. I don't see any more. So if you haven't already, there is an offer button to the, the right of your screen. You can click that to get more time with Tristan, and he can answer really specific questions. He can talk to you about challenges you're facing in your business and how Swept could potentially help with those. So click that offer button and book time with either him or one of our colleagues. And I think that's it for us. I'm gonna unmute Gary here so that we can properly thank him. I think I'm going to try. Gary, are you there? I don't know where Gary went. Okay, well, Gary can definitely hear me thanking him. Thank you all for attending today. Thank you, Tristan, for your presentation. And as Gary mentioned, we have one more presentation next Thursday with him. He is going to talk about how to create a killer proposal that will really help you close the deal. So tune in to that next Thursday, same time, same place. We will see you there. Thanks, everyone.